Incredible, positively the biggest discount prices ever. 137 brand new 82 Hondas, XR80, 200, CB 450 and 900, 1100 Interstate and more. Some slightly dented and scratched when shipped, but they're brand new and have the full Honda warranty. Lowest sacrifice prices. Yours on a first-come basis. The Honda Freight Damage Sale conducted by Allied Motorcycles. One location only, Fuller Glass Building, King George Highway across from the Dell Shopping Center.
BCTV. Our best show.
Good morning. We have enough union troubles in British Columbia right now without certain social credit MLAs waltzing round the place on white chargers with right to work and smash the union policies barely hidden behind some of their double talk. Now, I'm the first to agree that the IWA has considerable problems. They're going to find it very tough to hold what they've won already. And in the shingle industry specifically, they're on a spot where in the valley on the odd occasion, the guys in the mills, the union guys in the mills, are willing to work informally for a bit less than the top rate to keep their jobs going. And there's been trouble over that, as you've seen in this program. Bob McClellan, the Minister of Labour, has denied very firmly to me that he has any right to work union-smashing legislation in the plans for the spring session of the legislature, although he would like to ease certain aspects. But Bill Ritchie, the MLA for Central Valley West, has a different plan altogether. Whether or not he's a front man for Bob McClellan's secret policies, I don't really know. But I take kind of strong objections to an MLA going to a Labour plant and conducting what he calls a decertification vote. Now, here's what happened at the Scott Cedar plant in Mission yesterday. There was a so-called phony decertification vote, right? No supervision, no nothing, little scraps of paper, and there's Bill Ritchie. And here's the result of the so-called vote.
The vote was, there was a total of 39 voting, 1 abstained, 32 non-union, 6 union.
One day, who knows, there might be a proper decertification vote. That wasn't it. That was a straw poll arranged for propaganda purposes. The mill and Ritchie and the IWA better do their fighting in front of the Labour Board or it'll cause unholy trouble. Now we come to another area of trouble. And I want you to be reminded of what Don Hamilton, big shot in the Tory party on the West Coast, said on the program the other day when he was talking about certain anti-Clark people. Don Hamilton, lifelong Tory, look into that camera and tell the Joe Clark's enemies what you think of them when he had 66.9% and could easily have had a little motion, say, from Mulroney to make it 100%.
My message would be, thanks for nothing.
That message, which may become even more bitter, was directed at this man, Tom Sidden, the man who was given 30 pieces of silver for his part in the destruction, and it is destruction, of Joe Clark. Also in the studio this morning, if you regard Sidden as a baddie, I have a goodie. And the goodie is Lorne McCuish, Tory from Prince George-Bulkley Valley, who was wrongly identified on this program the other morning as one of Sidden's friends, when he's not. He's one of Joe's friends. And then for lighter relief to get away from all this, I have a friend from the Caribou. We're old friends. When I was up at the Williams Lake Stampede, she was a girl who walked behind me in the trail of the horses blowing a French horn. Her name is Marion Crook, and she has a yen for trouble. We'll meet her later in the program. But first off the top, our friend, 30 pieces of Sidden, 30 pieces of silver Sidden, after the break. Well, the message was even more brutal than that, I believe, to one of the MPs from British Columbia.
Yes, it was. Tom Sidden, at 11 o'clock on Friday night after the vote, someone slipped under his door an envelope containing 30 pieces of silver.
I tend to laugh about this particular story, but there's nothing to laugh about. Now, here's Tom Sidden. Very bitter feelings in the Tory party when somebody slips under your door 30 pieces of silver after you had played a prominent part in ruining Joe's permanent leadership, right?
No, Jack, I can't agree with you at all. No bitter feelings. These kind of things happen at political conventions. They're the games that people play. You suggested that Lorne McCuish was not my friend. He's the best friend I have in the BC caucus. Don Hamilton's always been my friend. So these are just, you know, Hamilton has it all wrong. You know, that shows how much he knows about it.
How was it wrong? Didn't you get the 30 pieces of silver
slipped under my door?
No.
No, they were handed to my wife a day earlier in a hotel room where we were meeting with a group of delegates because some people felt that members of Parliament shouldn't have opinions to express to delegates that were at the convention.
Have you got them with you?
Right here, Jack. There they are.
This is the 30 pieces of silver.
Right, yeah. I'm not bitter about it. These things happen, and we put them in the past and carry on.
10 p.m. at meeting 30 pieces of silver from PC Metro West.
Notice the silver.
So, cheap enough, eh?
They're all nickel-plated copper.
So this was Toronto Metro West. Where is that?
Well, that's PC Metro. That's the group in Toronto that was supposed to be out to organize support for the review vote. And this group, Review John Morris, is a group in Vancouver Quadra that was opposing that.
Well, is it not a fact that after all this internecine warfare and Lougheed hiding in a corner and Mulroney walking around with his snicker and his jaw jutting out, that you're liable to finish up with Joe Clark with the 51% support from the party?
Well, that's possible, Jack, but I think the feeling that many had, the 33% who voted for a review, was that we had to put all of this unrest in the party and the country aside, that the country is looking for leadership and they want to see the Progressive Conservative Party put the best possible choice before Canadians.
Had a deal been made with Joe, and you would know because you're very close to Huntington, one of the other hatchet men, had a deal been made with Joe that anything less than 70% and he would do what he did?
I don't think you could call it a deal. I think there was an understanding in caucus, and Mr. Huntington referred to that last Friday, the fact that we all hoped that Joe would do better than he did 2 years previously. The fact that he didn't meant that even though he had risen considerably in the Gallup polls, that there was still a considerable amount of dissatisfaction within the party, within the delegates that came to that convention. And so to clear the air, Mr. Clark, and to give him credit, he stood up and said, we will have a leadership convention.
I understand that, but had he given a promise committing himself to hand in his leadership if he got less than 70%? Was it a promise?
Well, I guess it's a question of what you define as a promise. He undertook before the caucus that if he did not improve his position, he would accept the calling of a leadership convention.
Now, obviously, we all know some of Joe's faults, perhaps, as a campaigner, but he had done very well in the House of Commons. Now, who have you got? Here you're going in now, the Liberals have a total advantage on you. They can time and choose what they want, and you haven't got, at the moment, an electable leader.
Well, that's your opinion, Jack. I think I saw Don Hamilton go through a long list of people and write each one off for one reason or another. Right. Start with Lougheed. There's a significant group of members of Parliament who are encouraging Peter Lougheed to put his hat in the ring. He has said he will not, but the understanding we have is that the door is open to crack. And if there was a public sentiment, a write-in, urging Peter Lougheed to run, supported by a group of MPs and others in the party, that could put together a very strong leader with a group of followers who would perhaps put the country on a different course.
Is it correct that Mulroney has promised to run as the French lieutenant if Lougheed will go?
I don't think there's any promise, but certainly that has been considered, that Brian Mulroney might benefit by throwing support to Peter Lougheed, and in 5 years' time, when Lougheed retired, that might put Mulroney in the position he'd like to be in.
And is it correct that Davis will support Lougheed if Lougheed will go?
I think so, because the polls indicate that Lougheed can do much better than Davis against the top-rated Liberal candidate, John Turner.
So your only hope now of a leader who with Mulroney in Quebec and Lougheed in the West, is if you get Ontario support, Lougheed might pull it off easily, even against John Turner.
You say that's the only hope. I don't believe that's the only hope, because if Lougheed decides not to run, I think you're going to see John Crosby materialize as a strong candidate. Peter Blakey, our recent national president, is very interested and will probably throw in with another candidate. Mulroney is there. Blakey, you've had him on this program.
Are you joking?
Well,
he's a national leader.
He's called a lot of favor with a lot of members of this party in his 2-year term as
But you're looking
president.
for a guy now with power, charisma, bilingual. I mean, tell me specifically, what was wrong with Joe when he had 66.9?
I guess that
What was wrong? I mean, be clinical.
I think that different members and different members of the Progressive Conservative Party and people across the country felt that Joe is a very fine person, a person of high integrity, and he had certain deficiencies in terms of being assertive, and a lot of people felt uncomfortable about that.
Do you regard him as a wimp?
No, I certainly do not. I regard him as a friend and a very capable person.
You think it was Fotheringham and Company who really destroyed him?
I think they manufactured an image for Joe which was very unfairly created.
Losing the laundry?
And been hung around his neck for far too long. The party has had to deal with that, and nothing has changed since the convention of 2 years ago.
So you decided...
So the air shall now be cleared. And if Joe comes out the best man, more power to him. I'll stand right behind him all the way.
What about the internecine warfare in British Columbia? Hamilton's on the air the other day, and he didn't say it, but he's out to fix you if he can. You will get opposition at your nominating.
I think that's ridiculous. I mean, Hamilton is entitled to his opinions, as are other party functionaries in British Columbia. But I'd like to know who they speak for, because they don't speak for the National Caucus. They don't speak for the British Columbia Caucus, both of which met this week and agreed that while we have differences of opinion on the question of leadership review and other matters, we are united in our desire to continue to provide a strong, loyal opposition. And if party functionaries want to try to split us down the middle, then I have to ask them what their motive is.
Party functionaries, you're the people who split it down the middle.
Oh, no, I don't believe that for one moment. How do you draw that conclusion, Jack?
Sidden, Huntington, Greenaway, Wenman, King, Oberle, you were all dedicated against
That's not a matter.
Joe.
We're entitled to freedom of thought and freedom of speech in our party. Maybe that's one of the defects of our party. We have strong-minded individuals.
Except for the one logical point, you've got 46 points in the Gallup poll. You could have walked in with anybody as your leader.
Yes, if there'd been an election called next week, but perhaps not in a year and a half's time, against a different leader for the Liberal Party. So we happen to have different views on whether or not there should be a leadership convention.
What was your majority in Richmond last time?
Oh, about 15,500 votes. I think Huntington was 10 votes less than I was, and we were both the top two in British Columbia. If these people like Hamilton and company want to try to take our nominations away, more power to them. It's a Democratic Party. Let them move in and see what supporters they can generate in our ridings, because we're happy to see more supporters and members signed up in our ridings. Bob Wenman,
Please take back your $3.
I don't deserve it, Jack.
Lorne McCuish after the break.
Thank you.
With Tom. This is the first time, believe it or not, in all my years in broadcasting that I've had Lorne McCuish, who's a Tory MP for Prince George-Bulkley Valley on. How long have you sat up there for the Tories?
Since May 79.
May 79. What do you do with people like this? Ruined your party. Put you right back down to the bottom of the heap again. You're split and divided, and the public is horrified at your behavior of poor old Joe, aren't they? At your treatment of poor Joe.
Oh, I felt that way about 11 o'clock at night last Friday, Jack. I didn't on Monday. Mm-hmm. I haven't since. That's one issue, and you guys can't get it through your head that the name of the game is unity, and that's precisely what we've got. That is what came out of the caucus meeting on Wednesday, was unity. That is all behind us, even no matter how much you try to roil things up.
Well, don't convince me. How can you, Lorne, please? How can you say you've got unity? I mean, that's absolute double talk, with all due respect. He gives me the same double talk, unity. Between now and the fall, between now and the fall, you're going to be carving each other up like nobody's business, inside and outside the caucus.
No. Look, families, baseball teams, friends, they have fights. Tom and I have fights, but after the issue is over, we go back to what we're supposed to be doing.
Eating your young.
No, we don't do that. We do. Tom and I have our fights so that we don't get our saber teeth out.
You've got Diefenbaker, Stanfield, and Clark in the last little while since Diefenbaker left. First of all, I got to apologize to you though, because Hamilton wrongly named you as voting with this man Sidden against Joe, and that was wrong, was it not?
He wrongly named me in being pro-review. Yes, very, very wrongly. From long before I was nominated, I was totally supportive of Joe Clark. The only difference that has come about in my attitude toward him is that that feeling has become stronger.
So you'll
So I took exception, and so did people in my writing, take exception to be named as effectively anti-Clark.
Well, it was corrected on the newscast later on because of what Hamilton said. It was corrected. But I'm glad to have you on this morning and make it quite clear that you want no part of any candidate chosen by Sidden and Frank Moores and Huntington and the backroom boys.
That's not what I said, was it?
I thought it was.
No, I just said I'm pro-Clark. That doesn't make me anti-Sidden.
It does make you anti-Sidden because he's pro-Lougheed. The man's got a defect in his judgment. Wouldn't you say that if he tried to get Lougheed?
You're a sweetheart, Jack. You really are.
You know what I'm saying.
That's like fighting with your wife but not going to bed with her.
Yeah,
I mean.
you can't blame us for your problems in your party, can
I'm not
you?
blaming you a bit, Jack. And I think you make more of the problems than really exist. I mean, Don Hamilton and others are entitled to their opinions, but they don't reflect the views of the members of Parliament who have to disagree on numerous issues all the time.
Now there's a technicality.
We agree to disagree quite often.
What can you tell me about the technicalities? First of all, Joe doesn't have to move out of Stornoway yet.
And bravo, he should stay there.
And the real tough guy, I won't call a hatchman, Nielsen, he picks up $38,500 a year of Joe's money, isn't that right?
Well, he has a lot of cousins to look after. He needs it.
And who will control the party funds during this hiatus?
National executive, I would suggest, Jack.
How does the national executive break down in anti and pro Clark?
First of all, they're all conservatives. They're going to fight amongst themselves.
Yeah.
Just the way Tom and I do, on issues.
I know. Unity.
On who? Yeah, sure. It's not cornpone, it's a fact.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps me going.
But I think in their conduct of their roles as members of the National Executive, they must be absolutely fair in the face of what has now been set, that being a leadership convention, and I don't feel that there's going to be any bias shown toward any particular candidate, Joe Clark or any other in the administration of party funds.
Can you say that with a straight face?
Yes, because we're a party that's preparing to govern, and after this convention is over, we're going to govern with the same type of objective fair play that will be exercised by the National Executive in leading up to this leadership convention.
Well, I mean, typical Fotheringham remark I'm making it. I'm very happy to see that Ontario's Residential Tenancy Act gives Clark 90 days grace before anyone can evict him.
I guess that, and plus Eric can invite him to stay a little longer if he wishes, so I don't think there's any problem there.
Eric can ask him to stay on longer.
Well, he's the owner of the house, officially.
You know, I don't think there's an issue here anyway, because Stornoway, I'm sure you've been there, Jack. It's a leaky old rat's nest as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't want to live there.
Let you living there for free.
Oh, well, if you let me live in my own little bachelor pad for free, I'd prefer it.
Good enough. Okay.
Here.
Let's go to the phones for a little bit. And although, mind you, we'll get sick and tired of this Tory infighting before the summer's over, but we had to bring...
You haven't seen any infighting here this morning?
No, you're both unified. You're absolute, total unity.
We love each other.
Except in who's going to be the leader of the party.
Oh, no, well, that's a matter of individual choice, and we're entitled to make that choice.
Let's put Messrs. Sidden and McCuish to the phones this morning. And maybe we'll get some calls from the Bulkley Valley to tell me about the real Lorne McCuish.
Yeah, how about that? You don't believe this is me, do you?
No, after the break. And I'm not going to...
There's a word going wrong, and we're not going to...
No. We're on the air. We're on the air. Because I've never dared ask any. No, I won't even raise it.
You're not going to invade the private lives of Her Majesty's finest.
Not even on the behaviour in the House of Commons. No, I'm not.
Not today.
From Kitimat, go ahead to the new firm. They're united, they tell me. McCuish and Sidden.
Yes, good morning, Jack, and good morning, Tom, and good morning, Lorne.
Good morning, sir.
Why don't we just tell the truth about this whole thing? Jack, it's very, very evident that
By the way,
Clark
are you
created his own problem. He manipulated the convention in Winnipeg, bought about 66% of the votes, and nobody else went for it. Let's tell the truth that Joe Clark is not a good leader, and as past president of the Skeena riding, I've been at the end of Joe Clark's leadership and the way that he's handled things. And I'll tell you, I'm not very satisfied with Joe's leadership, and I bet you right across this country, riding after riding, Joe is a weak leader. He's not a good leader. Let's tell the truth that Joe better go and let the party start growing the way it did under Stanfield, with integrity, with honesty, with no manipulation, with no games, and let's get it out in the open and clear the air and just go on his way nicely, because things have never been right.
Take a bet. He said the whole thing twice. That's a friend of yours or whatever from Kitimat.
Well, there's another man with a lot of real factual information. He knows that 60% of the delegates were bought off. Well, he's the only guy that knows it, and it's a crock. It's an absolute crock. And I started off on the same level as the people did in Skeena in 1979. And I started off supporting Joe Clark. And I have continued to support Joe Clark, and I am sitting for the second term. And how many Tories have they had for 2 terms in Skeena?
Yeah, good point. Prince George, go ahead.
Prince George?
Yes, yes. Speak up.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is the first time I ever got through your show, which is, I'm glad that I did.
Right.
The thing that I'd like to express is this, that in this country here, regardless what we have in politics or whatever, they seem to be fighting all the time with each other, like provincially or federally. Whoever gets in, they have some good policy, they tear it down instead of be behind it. Now, the same thing with this progressive conservative. They're not behind each other. They're not doing what is good for the country. They seem to be always doing what's best for the individual. And you hardly see this in the States. You know, when one party gets in, they're behind them. Let's get the country in the go. No, they get in, tear them apart.
Okay, but just a minute.
The only thing I have to say.
Okay, much obliged. Can't argue with motherhood, can you?
No, but except to say that we're not all arguing with one another, and we are putting something before the country, or we wouldn't be standing where we are in the Gallup poll.
You didn't. No, that's not correct. I was going to say it's not true.
What do you mean it's not correct?
You're standing high in the Gallup poll because the country at the moment hates the Liberals under Trudeau.
And they're looking for leadership, and they want to see our party put the best possible choice before Canadians, and that's what we're doing, John.
You had policies discussed at all at the Winnipeg Convention?
Certainly, policies have been discussed in our caucus for 2 or 3 years since we were defeated, and they were discussed in Toronto last May, and in these workshop sessions we discussed policy in Winnipeg. When we put the leader in front of the country, the policies will fall into place.
Wasn't much discussion on policy in Winnipeg, was there?
Well, there was the workshop, Jack. That wasn't much.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
In your meeting, you said that Canada deserves better than what they have. You were referring to the Liberals, and if the Conservatives were so united, what happened to the 29 renegades that didn't vote yesterday on Bill C-131? So that the pensioners could retain an equilibrium in the cost of living. What happened to those 29 Conservatives that failed to show up?
Well, sir, 1 or 2 of them are right here this morning and had accepted a commitment to come on this program. That's no excuse for not being present for a vote. We were not informed by the whip until late yesterday afternoon. We didn't think it fair to stand Jack Webster up and to cancel a number of other commitments. And I apologize if you feel we should have been there. I think that the whip excused a number of us because he had information to the effect that the Liberals wouldn't have their numbers out. Now,
well, then
it's too bad that's the way that...
You take that $3 that you got. You still with me?
I'm watching, sir.
Okay.
I'm listening.
You know that $3 that
yes,
you
sir.
got? Well, you go and distribute that amongst your old age pensioners in Richmond.
Well, my old age pensioners know exactly how our party stands on that issue.
You you wouldn't even represent them so that they would get their equal share.
Well, certainly I did, sir, and I spoke at length in the House in my opposition to what the government was trying to do on that bill.
Well, what kind of malarkey? You're telling the public that you're all united and Canada deserves better. And 29 of you guys didn't show up. Is that, you call that united?
Well, there were a considerable number missing from the House for a number of reasons, sir.
Okay.
On that point, it's just a political fact that the Liberal whip would have had 12 men there if we added another 9. They would have had 20 men there if we'd had another 18. They're in the background, ready to come in. They
Wouldn't have made any practical difference.
No, it wouldn't have.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Well, my question was the same as this last one. 29 Tories were absent for the vote for Bill C-131. It's in the province this morning.
That's the one which restricts the increase in old age pension to 6 and 5.
Why is that? No, I don't think we've got a clear answer.
Mr. McCuish attempted to give you an answer. He said that the government would have won the vote regardless.
Sure. They had the forces in the lobby. They're ready to bring them in.
And they know our numbers.
So that's as simple as that.
Every time they have a majority, and until we replace that majority, we're powerless.
But you can understand the disappointment of many an old age pensioner who says
Jack.
the Tories wasn't
we
there.
chose between you and being there at 5:45 last night. We perhaps made the wrong choice.
Cheap shot. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Tom,
Yes, sir.
you and I are friends, and you know the details of a very bitter disagreement that I had with Joe Clark. And even though our disagreements were resolved between me and Joe Clark because the guy was completely approachable, where he could have been some bullhead like Ron Huntington, and it would have been a hopeless situation. Now, I can't imagine for the life of me you having any bigger quarrel with Joe Clark than I had.
I have
and
no
as
quarrel
such,
with Joe
I
Clark.
believe it was your sacred duty to your constituents to try and resolve your differences with Joe Clark and work with the team instead of against it. And I'm sick and tired, Tom, of these Joe Who jokers, because if there's a Joe Who in the crowd anywhere, it's this damn John Morrison. I understand he has some kind of a paper out as a carrier boy for Peter Worthington.
Well, sir, I don't have any differences with Joe Clark. I want to make that clear. I have, well, no, just a minute, Jack. I have a high regard for the man, his integrity, and what he has done for our party. But I happen to feel there are a number of other capable people who want the chance to be measured up against him, and we have had a problem for 2 years of uncertainty and unsettledness in the party, and this is going to be the way to clear the air.
That's right. You agree with Fotheringham's last line in his column in Maclean's this week, where he damns Fotheringham Clark as a man with ambition but no talent. That's what you think of Joe Clark.
I haven't said that at all, Jack. I think if Joe is the man to lead the country, then Joe will be measured up and come out ahead of any other candidate.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
That's you, sir.
I think that the real reason that Joe got dumped was because he didn't stand for anything. And the party began to understand that the people want answers to their problems. They want people to stand up and say, hey, this metric and this and that and the other. The people that were really the things that we're really concerned with. And I think that these are the real issues. And personality-wise, that Joe didn't get dumped for that, because look at President Reagan.
Lorne McCuish.
Guys don't get dumped.
Did Joe stand
People
for
without issues get dumped.
Let's get Lorne's answer to that.
What caucus is all about, sir, and what the National Caucus is all about is to discuss...
By the way, Judge Les Bruley, or whatever his name is, he's the one that gave me that idea, and I agree with it.
Oh, well, that puts you away in the right wing of the Tory party. We can leave that one. Victoria, go ahead, please. From Victoria, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes.
How do you do?
Is this me?
That's you.
Okay. I'm getting a little sick here. Hearing everybody say, look, Joe was not dumped. He was a man, and he said, okay, I've got 66.9, and anybody sitting at that table, if their constituents voted for them at 66.9, would they give up their job? Now, this guy that received 32 pieces of silver, are you not supposed to go by the 15,000 constituents in your riding?
Certainly am, sir.
Do you go to these meetings? They pick people to go. Did you go in front of your people and tell them your thoughts, the way you were going to vote?
or did you just go there, like most politicians when you get in, and vote your own way, not the way your constituents tell you to vote?
Well, just a minute, sir.
That's what I'd like to find out. We get back to a government that votes what the people want in their riding. This would be a better government. Now, don't pick on Joe all the time. He did get dumped. He resigned, and he was a man, and I'd vote for that man any day.
He was
not like some other people.
He was certainly a man, sir. My constituents represent all political persuasions, and many have none. But this decision was determined by members of the Progressive Conservative Party in my riding who discussed this issue at length.
You mean the Joe Clark issue?
The Joe Clark issue. That's an internal party matter.
They knew you were in...
And we have a voting procedure under our Constitution, which is a measure of confidence. It's not a measure of whether or not somebody has a simple majority. I believe that a party leader has to have a much higher confidence rating than having only 2/3 of the party with him. That's not the same as whether or not you get elected against some other candidate, which is what will be determined at the leadership convention. If a party leader lacks the confidence and dedicated support of 1/3 of the people who are sent to a convention by their members in the ridings, then that person is not going to be effective in leading that party into an election.
Not Diefenbaker, not Pearson, not anybody else ever got 100% or 80% of their
Generally
caucus behind them.
scored 75 and plus, Jack.
Okay, take a break. One more segment with the 30 pieces of silver man, the man who wants a new leader, although he's united behind Joe.
I will be behind any leader that our party selects.
You're united behind Joe? You are united behind Joe?
I'm united behind Eric Nielsen at the present time. Jack, he's the interim leader of our party.
You're united behind Joe.
You bet your bippy.
After the break. Tom Sidden, Richmond, and some people are out to get him. Yeah, they are. They told me so.
Sure.
Lorne McCuish of Prince George-Bulkley Valley, secure and happy in the knowledge of constituents. Lovely for your unity behind Joe.
I wish I had his majority.
Oh, you were kind of narrow, were you? Eh? How much?
3,000.
That's not too bad. Go ahead from Powell River.
Yes, Mr. Webster, can you tell me who are the 3 MPs that are going to be having problems in getting re-nominated for their constituency?
I believe it's 4.
For the next election.
Well, the names that I picked out in the BC caucus split are Sidden, Huntington, Greenaway, Wenman, King, and Oberley.
I see.
That's 5.
I would like to state right now that I'm a Joe Clark man, and that I don't particularly like Mr. Sidden because he stabbed Joe Clark right in the back.
Oh,
where
that's
he
a pile of
really
garbage,
needed
sir.
his support.
That's a pile of garbage.
And I hope he enjoys the 30 pieces of silver.
Well, fair enough,
Thanks
sir.
a lot.
This gentleman is entitled to his opinion, Jack. I don't think I'm going to lose my nomination because I've already been nominated. But in any event, that's a matter for constituencies to decide, and anybody that wants to come in and sell memberships, they're entitled to do so.
Well,
More power to them.
I think this way of picking a national leader by paying fares of the selected people of Ottawa is pretty stinky.
Yeah, some of us would agree with
Why
that.
shouldn't the members of the House of Commons choose a prime minister after you get all elected?
I think it's very important that the views of caucus, those that work most closely with their leader on a week-to-week basis, be considered much more seriously than they have been under the process we have.
Lon, what do you think?
Well, I don't agree with you, Jack. I think it's up to the people in the riding to choose their members. I think it's up to the people in the riding to choose the leader.
Why not elect a leader? Put him on the ballot. That would be a lot better.
Well,
a halfway Americano system.
There's certainly something very improper about electing a leader at a 2-day convention with a lot of hoopla and a lot of people who, as you say, Jack, have their fares paid and others who do not.
Go ahead, please.
You just do not select the best quality person by that process.
Go ahead, please. Where are you?
Hello.
That's you.
Yeah. Good morning, gentlemen.
Hello.
As a Canadian and a Westerner in particular, I'd like to express my dissatisfaction and disappointment with the Tory government. I believe we are desperately in need of a change of government right now, and what the Tories have done could have dashed all hopes that I desire for a change of government. I believe that the Tories were practically a shoo-in for this next election, And they may have ruined that for all of us that need a change of government.
Lorne?
I'd like to see what the gentlemen have to say to that.
You've got a good point. Of course, that's the attitude that's prevalent across the country now. But Tom and I want to stress the fact that that was an issue, sir. That was a minor issue in comparison with the problems that we've got in the House, and we shouldn't be fighting amongst ourselves. We should be fighting the grits who have brought this on.
That's right.
Yeah, but you're saying that the differences and the bitterness and the bad feeling were so bad that you had to come to this crunch.
Well, let me put it this way, that there's one guy back in Ottawa right now that isn't fighting with Tories, and that's Joe Clark. There's another one that is not fighting with Tories, and that's Tom Sidden. But we are fighting the Liberal government.
And we'll continue to do that. But
no,
the gentleman
you've got
said...
a beautiful way of putting the guy down, but that's right, Jack.
No, I'm not putting you down. I'm saying all your energies for the last 2 years, or year anyway, have been exhausted trying to decide what to do about the
You're
leadership.
right.
We've got to pick up the pieces.
And those 2 years have passed by and we're no further ahead. But let me say, Jack, that I don't think leadership conventions are negative or detrimental or divisive for a party. The convention of '76 led to a leader, a young leader, a very promising leader being elected by a slender majority. He went on to become Prime Minister of Canada. We went up in the Gallup poll. All of those who had opposed him as alternative candidates were in his cabinet. They worked together with Joe Clark to put the best possible government we could in a minority situation together. And I think that will happen again.
Sorry you raised that point. You go back to the convention. What year was he elected?
76.
76. I can remember some of them. Wagner, St.
Mulroney.
Stevens, Mulroney,
Fraser,
Flora MacDonald. Who else? Hellyer.
Hellyer.
And what happened in that was that the enmities came out.
Jack Horner
came out in bitter transference. And finally, people like St. Stevens were throwing their votes to the people whom they hated least.
Indiscriminately.
And so Joe got the leadership by accident.
Well,
he was the least disliked.
He was elected by democratic means, that's all I can say.
But you know what I'm saying.
But nonetheless, the party united behind him. The promise of a new young leader led to a resurgence of our position in the Gallup poll. That will happen again this time.
That sounds like one of social credit's recession-proof ads.
I believe we're going to move ahead as a consequence of this leadership
I'm
convention.
convinced that eventually you will overcome all obstacles. You will be totally unified.
We will move from there to putting a campaign together, and the Grits, if they weren't afraid of that right now, you would hear a lot more from them than we have.
What do you think you'll be in the next Gallup poll? 32?
I think that if you turn the Gallup poll graph upside down, you'll find our trend.
I predict, Jack, that we're going to stay where we are in the Gallup poll until we select a new leader.
I'll bet you 30 pieces of silver. You do not exceed 40 in the Gallup poll.
I suspect we'll be at 42, but I'll give you my 30 pieces of silver. How'd you like that?
If you're
and everything that goes with it.
If you're less than 40. If you're less than 40.
Surely I will.
Fair enough. Have I spoken to Salmon Arm? Hello?
Hello?
That's you and Salmon Arm.
Hello?
Hello? Hold on, I'm afraid that this connection isn't quite working right. Let me go somewhere else. Sorry about that, sir. We'll try once more. Can you hear me now?
I can barely hear you.
I'm afraid... Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
You can hear me now. Okay, go ahead, please.
I'd just like to say something to Mr. Sidden, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
Can I turn my comments to him?
Yes,
Right here.
Well, first of all, I would like to know when they had 46% of the Gallup poll and they had the election won, why he stabbed Joe Clark in the back.
I didn't stab Joe Clark in the back, sir. Joe Clark was at 22% on the Gallup poll when Trudeau was at 35 and Broadbent was at 35. So where the party stood was
you
not...
had the election won and
no,
you turned it right over to the Liberals.
We haven't got an election today, sir.
But you're going to have an election, and I will tell you something else, Mr. Sidden.
Well, you tell me then.
If I was in your constituency and you were running against a yellow dog, I'd vote for the yellow dog.
Well, that's fair enough. You should talk to some of my constituents to see how they feel.
That's a good line. In case anybody missed it. If that guy were in your constituency and you were running against the yellow dog,
he'd vote for the yellow dog.
That's terrific. I'm not allowed to laugh at these things, am I?
Well, the only reason I'm laughing is because I'm a dog lover.
Go ahead.
Oh, good morning, Jack.
Morning, ma'am.
I wanted to remind you, going back before Joe Clark was elected, when you were still on radio, when everyone was saying Joe who, I called you and said that he would be elected for Prime Minister. Now, a lot of the media types like Farthingham who jumped on him and used him as to make great columns out of, has never forgiven him. They've just never forgiven him for proving that they were wrong, and they're not going to. But the problem that these people have, the Conservatives have, are people like myself who are swing voters. Now, they can do all the picking and choosing of a leader that they want to, but they've got to convince me that they're not going to go and destroy themselves again.
Lorne, hold on, ma'am. Lorne.
Well, the lady's got a good point. People that are deeply involved in politics all the time think it's a black and a white, but there are so many conscientious people in Canada who don't have party affiliations, and that is the group of people who are shaking their heads when there's an indication that we're not in accord in their cause.
Fair enough. When's the next crisis? When's the next blow-up?
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, Jack. We don't have blow-ups in our party.
When's the convention?
I think the convention will be called in the middle of February for sometime in June.
February for sometime in June. And of course,
perhaps
you'll only
September.
It's going to cost a minimum of $500,000 to run, isn't it, as a leader?
Well, the cost, I think for an individual candidate, it'll cost that kind of a
Well, that means Lougheed,
amount.
perhaps, but very perhaps Mulroney.
Crosby.
Oh, he's got all the money in the world. Has Clark got enough money to run?
No. Not Joe Clark, Esquire, no.
So you boys will have to put up the money for Joe, and get the money for Joe somewhere.
Yep.
There's a lot of $100 a crack contributors out there, and if Joe Clark is the man to lead the country, he'll find the financial support.
But you watch in June or July, Jack. You won't find Peter Lougheed. You won't find Bill Davies. You won't find Brian Mulroney. You'll find John Crosby. You'll find Murgatroyd Snurr, and you'll find Joe Clark.
And he'll win.
You bet.
Well, I believe if the public will dictates, Peter Lougheed will run. And if people will write him a letter, I'm sure they can persuade him to do so.
Okie dokie. My thanks to Tom Sidden. My thanks to Lorne McCuish. And I'll be back after the break. This is Marion Crook, and it's a true little fact of life that when I went up to open the Williams Lake Stampede, you were walking behind, weren't you?
I was, yes.
With a French horn.
Right.
Being careful where you stepped.
Being careful where I stepped.
On a wet and miserable day.
Wasn't it awful?
Now, I normally, I like to make a bow towards people in parts of British Columbia who write their own books and don't have the big professional hoopla behind them. How long have you been up in the Caribou?
I came in '63, so that's 20 years.
And what have you done mainly in the Caribou?
I came up as a public health nurse, and I guess as a public health nurse, I've been all over the Caribou. And I worked as that, and then in the hospital also, and back to public health. And
tell me about the time you fried the pigs.
I didn't fry them, Jack, really. What happened was I was working afternoon shift at the hospital in intensive care nursery with babies on respirators and all sorts of things. And then I went home at midnight, and 2 of my daughter's piglets were very, very cold, and they'd just been born. So my husband and I took them in the house, and we bottle fed them to get them warm. Now you have to realize that it takes almost an hour to get 3 ounces of milk into a piglet.
No,
so after having worked all day, I was getting this into the piglet, and at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I put these 2 little piglets in a box, put a heat lamp on them because they have to be warm, and went to bed. And in the morning, my 5-year-old son went and looked and said, "Hey, Mom, you cooked the pigs." They were dead. I had put them too close. And
life in the Caribou, of course, is something which does involve animals. Did you ever run sheep?
I have a lot of sheep. That book is about sheep ranching.
Oh,
some
the book.
of it.
It's a yen for trouble.
Yeah. Well, they talk about sheep ranching. Yes, I've been up to here in sheep, yes.
Any trouble with dogs or coyotes?
Well, we had, I thought they were coyotes' problem, but it turned out to be 2-legged coyotes that were taking all my sheep. And RCMP told me that the 13 sheep I had lost were being stolen, and that I should go on range patrol or range watch, where you put a little tag in a pickup truck that's not yours, you know. And I asked a rancher, a nearby rancher, whether that was really effective in stopping rustling. And he said, well, he thought it was a good program, but it helped to put a bullet through the radiator at the same time.
You never had to do that?
No. They heard that I'd hired the RCMP up and I never lost any more.
So therefore, there are people who go around the caribou, and when they want the little piece of lamb on the hoof, they take the lamb on the hoof. Eh?
That's right. And does it make me mad?
Absolutely. You're still running sheep?
A few, yes.
What kind of sheep are you running?
Mostly Southdown.
Suffolks.
Southdowns are too little.
Yeah, Suffolks, the black
Yes,
heads.
the black one.
Now, are you in for trouble? What kind of book is it? What's it about?
It's 3 mystery stories, one set in Chilliwack, one in McLeese Lake, and one in the Chilcotin, and they're all in the one book.
I once went from Williams Lake to Bella Coola. How is the road now?
It's much better.
Now, what about your flying? You and your husband both fly.
Well, he has the license, and I sneak.
You sneak?
Well,
a little bit at the time.
I took lessons, but I haven't the license. I have a student's license.
Well, you originally came from what, Clearbrook or Abbotsford?
Cloverdale.
Cloverdale. Went up there in '63.
Yes.
It's a good life, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting life. I don't know where else I could have driven a 1937 Allis Chalmers and a trail bike and all sorts of vehicles
and fly a plane.
Fly a plane
at the same time. Now, is this your first book?
That's my first book.
What does it cost?
$10, $9.95.
And do you publish this yourself?
Yeah, I did that one, and I'm doing another one in May. And I like publishing this.
How can you afford these? This is what you would call vanity press.
No,
isn't
it isn't.
You're just writing it for the sake of your ego. You want to have it down in black and white for the family.
Well, there is vanity press, but that self-publishing differs. Rod McEwen self-published. It's different. Self-publishing, you do this, you handle the distribution, and you really want to make money. You don't just want books.
So therefore, you contract out the printing to a publisher.
That's right. And 2,000 people so far have bought it, so the public doesn't think it's vanity.
So that's 2,000 at $10. That's 20,000 less your printing costs. So you've got 5,000 or 6,000 already.
In the hole already.
What do you mean? Oh, in the hole already?
Oh yes, it's going to though.
How many do you have to sell to break even?
Depends on your costs, and when you first start, like I wasn't very proficient at knowing how to cut costs, so I didn't do well. But this book I put out for half the cost of that one. The next book is for half the cost of that one.
Half
so
the
I'm learning.
Cost of this one, so you're learning. But you've got to go down to stores and try and get them to
No, I have a distributorship, Gordon Sulls, Van Mag, and Mainland.
And they put your book up
They
on the
put,
thing for
I
you.
don't go stores.
For $10, that's not too bad.
No.
I haven't read the book. Is it good?
It's good, you'll like it.
What's the next book about?
The next book's about a girl who runs a motel near Barkerville. And so it's another mystery.
You're picking local characters?
Well, that's what I know about.
Yeah. It's nice country.
Yeah, it's
well, I'll
beautiful.
see you at the Williams Lake Stampede one of these years.
I'll practice.
You're French horn.
Right.
Okay, a plug for Marion Crook, a yen for trouble. If you buy it at $10, she'll eventually get out of the hole and make vast sums of money. My regards to the people of Williams Lake. What was the name of the citizen of the year that I was sitting with?
Laura Gunderson.
Laura Gunderson.
Wiggs, yeah.
Wiggs.
Yeah, she used to run a logging camp. I used to have a baby clinic in her logging camp.
You had baby clinics and logging camps?
I did indeed.
Still kind of primitive health care in parts of the caribou?
I used to tie the chains of my car up with bandages so they wouldn't flop, you know?
Yeah. Them were the days.
Them were the days.
My thanks to Marion Crook. Next, the Webster Free for All to finish off Friday and the week after the break.
Have information from the under the Freedom of Information Act in the states that they will impose a 25% duty rate minimum on our exported forest products.
I don't accept what you say, I don't believe it, and I don't think any decision has yet been made which could be available under the Freedom of Information Act.
Well, I've been down there, and I'm a former union member, and I know that they're going to do it.
Well, I've been talking to industry, union, the people in Washington, and nobody can say what they're going to do on March the 7th. They will not impose a duty on March the 7th. What they will do is they will make a preliminary decision which may lead to a tentative bond which would have to be put up by exporters until the final decision comes in July. It is wrong to cause panic in the streets by saying that you know of a 25% duty. I don't accept it.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I know I'm right in that. got no idea. How the devil would he know about a 25% duty? Or anybody else for that matter. Certainly there are certain people who are mouthing off Great Depression. Every time you mouth off the fact there's going to be a 25 or a 50% or a 90% or $120 a thousand, you're probably causing jobs to be lost in British Columbia. We can afford to wait until March the 7th and get a decision. And then, if necessary, we can panic. If it's a temporary $7 or $8 a thousand imposed in the equivalent of a bond, that can be handled toughly. If it's something extravagant, we're in trouble. But nobody should be causing panic in the streets now. Yeah, I'm right on that. I'm sure I'm right. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster. Could you please explain to me why...
Yes? Why?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was thinking there. Could you explain to me why the government of British Columbia is doing their cutbacks, and when Mr. Van der Zalm comes around, or Mr. Bill Bennett, our Premier, if you get those two people on your program, could you ask them when things are going to improve in the provincial budget type deal?
Well, I've done that a number of times. We're already facing a $1.3 or $1.4 billion deficit. The government's had to go into the money market for short-term treasury bills, which is something that social credit hated to do. They're doing it because government revenues are sharply down, severely down, and they're attempting to cut their coat according to the cloth. And I don't think Mr. Bennett or Mr. Van der Zalm or anyone else can tell me more about the economy than we have presently learned from a program we did this week, in that there are more hopeful signs on the horizon, but it'll be quite the end of this year or the end of next year before there's an appreciable turn up in the economy. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Could you tell me, is it possible to get the names of all the Conservative caucus through Hansard?
Yeah, of course.
Because I'd like to invite them all to put on the biggest television show ever held in Canada. They're the greatest bunch of tap dancers and tightrope walkers I've ever seen. And I thought if we could put it on at the Ottawa Arts Centre, it might be a good show for the television public in Canada.
Don't suggest it to the CBC or they'll do it.
Or maybe we should open our expo here with it. Bring them all in on the light rapid transit and for a low fare, and they might do something for the country that way, and being the first guinea pigs to ride on this automated light rapid transit.
They certainly have a couple of clowns who'd be a big success anywhere.
The clowns would be no problem at all.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. I'm phoning about your conversation a short while ago with Mr. Axworthy. Mm-hmm. He indicated on that program that the UIC were doing a good job. And in October, I'm a single parent now. In October, I went off on maternity leave. And I applied down at UIC with all 3 separation papers. The girl at the desk only took 2 of the separation papers. About a month later, I received some report cards in the mail. I filled them out. I returned them to UIC. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I received a report that I was disqualified because I was not employed at the time I became pregnant. I phoned down there. I told them that I had brought down the separation paper from my employment, that I was working at the time I became pregnant. So I brought the separation paper down there. About 3 weeks after that, I still received nothing from them, so I contacted them again. They then advised me I was still disqualified. So I went down there, and all they had done was stuck the separation paper in the file, not entered it into the computer. They said that would be done immediately. So about a week later, I contacted them again. I was still disqualified. And this went on, and it was up until just on Wednesday, I finally received checks.
That's from October until February.
Yeah. And that is supposed to be a good job by UIC when you are on maternity leave, a single parent, and you're depending on that money to get by.
Ma'am, you
have saved enough money to last me for 2 months, and I wound up borrowing from friends. They told me to go to welfare. Welfare, of course, you have to pay the money back to them once you get it from UIC.
It was a pity you didn't have a union in at the beginning, because I find that union queries get better treatment than Quidditch from the general public, ma'am. I'm glad you won. Nothing I can say except to say thank you for the example. Where am I going? Victoria. Hello. Hello.
Brian or Victoria, Jack?
Right, go ahead.
Okay, how you doing?
Not bad.
Well, it's a free-for-all. I didn't really know where to touch. I should be getting out yesterday. You mentioned something about chimney sweepers. You had some guests on. Well, for the last while, you know, I've been doing chimney sweeping. And one of your gentlemen, or your guests, I forget which one it was, he mentioned that, you know, sure, it's great to clean out your chimney by burning it, you know, it will do it. But, Jack, that was the whole point, you see. I've been doing quite a few chimneys, and I have seen the result. First of all, if you allow your chimney to burn out, you've got a liner in there, and you'll burn out your liner. As a result, the creosote's going to build up more. And the second of all, it's one thing if it's a new chimney, Jack, but if you get an old chimney where the mortar or the plaster, or not the plaster, the cement's coming out, and it has a hole, and you offer to burn it out, you get a chance of starting a fire. So it's not a very good practical thing to do.
I get all my chimneys swept once a year, and I get a little certificate on the chimney so that nobody can say I didn't clean my chimney. I hope you've got a top hat. I wish you well, and clean all the chimneys you can. See? Didn't know you had to wear a top hat when you were cleaning a chimney, did you? You've got to wear a top hat when you're cleaning a chimney. That's the tradition. More free-for-all after the break. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'd like to thank you for allowing the BC Hydro apprentices to present their point of view on your show this week.
Thank you. I'm glad we did that.
And, well, it may be all for naught according to Mr. Donnelly, but unfortunately I couldn't get in through phone yesterday, but I'd just like to add this, that Mr. Bonner received his new $24,000 Oldsmobile this week, and I hope he really enjoys it.
Do you mean, is this his hydro car?
That's right.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, sir.
You've seen it? I mean, $24,000 nowadays for a big shot like that for a car.
Well, some of us have to drive around in 69 Volkswagens, so...
But why don't you suggest a swap?
I'd love to. I'd rather have my apprenticeship back, though.
What color is it?
I believe it's blue.
Actually, there was a slight movement forward when I was talking to Donnelly yesterday about this government plan, but it was quite obvious that nothing had been set for Friday as McClellan said it had been.
No.
But we'll nag McClellan next week and see what he can get out of Hydro as their so-called final solution. I think it was a good story. I think it was well worth doing. I still think it was wrong for Hydro not to phase out the apprentices as they finish their apprenticeships.
Well, thanks for your help, Jack.
Thank you. My pleasure. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, I'm on the same topic. On Wednesday, Mr. McClellan said that we would all receive our tickets, and he also said, like you said, on Friday we were going to have a decision. Now we get this Mr. Donnelly on yesterday, and he said only 5 of us are going to get our tickets now.
Oh, no, he said, a number would be examined for your instant qualifications and exams, and then they were going to have 8 places perhaps in a training program which would be hot-wired training program and not simulated in some part of the BC Hydro.
Yes, but didn't Mr. McClellan say that he was going to get all the apprentices? It'll take a couple of months, he said, or a few months. He's going to get all the apprentices in.
Yeah, something like that, but he weaseled, I mean, not weaseled, but he didn't give me any promise that everybody was going to get the tickets.
Well, that's the way I read it.
All right, we'll listen to it again. We'll listen to that again so that when I'm talking to him next week, I can quote it back to him.
Yeah.
What upset me about that was the ads which say the new highly skilled, highly paid jobs will go to British Columbians.
That's right.
And we have $100 million for developmental training.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't apply to the apprentices.
Well,
in fact, I think that should probably apply to the 2,500 apprentices who've been laid off. We can't train our own apprentices. Sure as God made little apples, we'll be bringing them in from the States and the UK again.
Well, let's grill them on it. Let's find out who to believe here, Jack.
Well, I'll keep after them. I'm much obliged. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Yeah, just 2 small points on your conversation this morning, which I thought was very interesting. Mr. Lougheed must be probably one of the most fated politicians of all time, in Canada. He must be laughing up his sleeve. But I wonder if the the sort of 33% of the Conservative Party are not whistling in the wind a little bit. Mr. Lougheed has said he will not run. He said that consistently, and if they're putting all their sort of faith in Mr. Lougheed running, it seems they may come a cropper.
That's right.
The other point is that do you not feel that there might be a little bit of a sort of backlash by the public? You know, the underdog sort of syndrome for Mr. Clark, because he's sort of taken everything that everybody's thrown at him for 2 years and still in there fighting. And a lot of people may feel that he'll be a really much better man for it if he can come through it.
I think that's a very good point, and that was why I bet the 30 pieces of silver with Sidden this morning that in the next Gallup poll, the Tories will be under 40 points.
Yeah, that's
Much obliged.
Thanks, Jack.
Right. You're a Geordie.
I'm a Geordie from Sydney on the peninsula.
Yeah, but you're a Geordie.
Yep.
Yeah, right. See, he is a Geordie. Go ahead, please.
From Cranbrook?
Cranbrook it is.
Jack, I just wanted to try and bring you up to date a little bit on what happened in Winnipeg there. I think we're perhaps overlooking the fact that the Progressive Conservative Party is a Democratic Party. It's perhaps the only Democratic Party left. They are not sheep. They will not follow blindly as they will in some of the other parties. And therefore, they have to be handled a little bit differently. For those people who were in Winnipeg, they probably came out of there and they saw that the Progressive Conservative Party was, in fact, a united party. Certainly they saw that the philosophy of the party is sound, and it is as a center of the road conservative philosophy. We keep talking, and I notice that you keep talking about Dump Joe. In my opinion, it was not a Dump Joe movement that the vote was on the 29th of January. It was, in fact, are you in favor or against a leadership convention? And there are many reasons why people can be in favor of a leadership convention. It has nothing to do with Joe Clark, the personality. It has everything to do with the future of the party and putting forward the strongest possible foot.
And the strongest possible candidate. And don't try and tell me, although you make some reasonable logic, don't try and tell me that there weren't 9,000 knives in Joe's back.
I do not believe that the knives were out at all, and I think Tom Sidden came up with a very good reasoning this morning on just that issue. This question of knives invariably comes mostly from the political cartoonists and from the media.
Oh, come off it.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And I would say
any normal political party would have confirmed the leader at 66.9%.
Not necessarily.
In other words, he's not a good enough candidate, he must be changed.
I don't think people are saying that. I think let's see what is available and let's see whether or not Joe Clark is the best man, and he will come out of it stronger, or else a stronger candidate will show.
Fair enough. Thank you very much, but I can't talk in circles all morning. I talk in circles a lot of time. Next call will be from Horsefly. I wonder if it's a man with the beer bottles. After the break. Horsefly, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Webster.
Morning, sir.
Yeah, I'm phoning about the NEED program. You had the ministers on there signing an agreement.
Right.
I just want to set the public straight on what happens with that. I went through this NEED program to get 3 people working, and went to local forestry and got approval of a site to do and everything, and went through all the paperwork and driving back and forth to all the ministries and everything, and finally sat down with a proposal, and they agreed on it. And then I find out that it says right in the application, for the ministries of the province, these jobs are for. And I got down to the point with it okay and everything, and they wouldn't sign it. The forestry would not sign it. And I was told all because that they hadn't got a formal letter saying they were invited into the project. Now, I was told that this thing was for the ministries, was for the forestry.
Axworthy came and signed the agreement with the province of British Columbia. He signed the agreement. the need agreement? Have you spoken to Waterland's office?
Well, I've been in town, and like from the local end here, they're really helpful. But they say they're getting a phone call from Williams Lake to Horsefly saying don't sign these, and they're getting a phone call from Victoria. And the fellow I deal through UI on the NEAT program, John Barr, he's been helping out, and he's been phoning Victoria, and he can't find out why that they signed this agreement, spent millions of dollars signing, and that they won't sign these programs.
And
the
this is
forestry, the ministries, any of the ministries.
This is maybe there's a new snag on the deal. Well, I think maybe you should leave your number, and we might make a phone call to John Barr or to the ministry in Victoria and find out what the devil's happened.
I can't hear you, Mr. Webster.
Well, we'll take your phone number and we'll phone the ministry and we'll find out what the holdup is.
Okay, very good. Because there's a lot of people now that have been going for 2 or 3 months waiting for this project, have been cut off UI. They get the project themselves, like me, running around for a month and a half, making phone calls, get it all set up, and then sit down at the table, and then they say, oh, well, we can't sign this.
I've got the message. Hold on. Don't hang up.
Okay.
Next call. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep. That's you.
I am been a Liberal all my time in Canada.
Right.
And I've been speaking to a lot of my Liberal friends, and we are very, very fed up with the present government.
You hate Trudeau.
We don't like him at all.
Right. And what's your suggestion?
My suggestion is that the Conservative Party, which an awful lot of us want to join, should take into consideration this maybe 100,000 Liberals of this opinion today. Now, if they continue with Mr. Clark, well, we won't vote for him.
In other words, they can pick up 100,000 Liberals if they get Peter Lougheed.
Yes, or I'd say anyone of substantial standing.
What?
What we have, we can't see anything in Mr. Clark.
Thank you, sir. That's clear enough. Go ahead, please.
Is that me?
That's you.
Yeah, well, Jack, I'd like to get my licks in here, too.
Right.
And by the way, I am a Geordie.
Right.
Born in Newcastle on Tyne. You know, I've been watching these two jokers on here all morning, and if these are the only alternatives we have, we're in a sick situation here.
I'm afraid so.
I think what you're doing, even you don't do it. We have 45% of the popular vote in this province vote socialist constantly.
If you'd asked for what I would have done had I been a Tory and had I been at the convention, I would have voted for Clark for the obvious reason
so would I
that with Clark they could win, and presumably they could have got together a half-decent cabinet, and then they could have judged his performance later on. I think they cut their own throats.
Yeah,
I think they're stupid.
They're going to destruct symbol.
Stupid. Go ahead, please.
Good
Hello.
morning, Jack.
Good morning, ma'am.
A little lightheartedness. Do you recall the program you had where you found out that it was illegal to ask 2 questions on an application form for what one was how old you were, and the other, do you have a war record? Do you recall that program?
Vaguely. Vaguely.
Yeah. Well, anyway, did you hear of the Glasgow wag who was asked the latter question, do you have a war record? His answer was, yes, I have virulence singing the White Cliffs of Dover.
I have failed in singing the White Cliffs of Dover.
I have virulence singing the
Oh,
White Cliffs
do you
of
have
Dover.
a war? Oh, I get it. Do you have a war record?
Yeah.
Yes, I have a record of virulence singing the White Cliffs of Dover. That's very funny.
Okay.
Thank you. It really is quite funny. Do you have a war record? Yes, I have a record of Vera Lynn singing the White Cliffs of Dover. That's a good joke. Go ahead, please.
Yes, it's Victoria.
Yes, Victoria.
This goes back to a remark that Mr. Sidden's Silver Sidden made just before the break.
Silver Siddens.
Right.
Keep it short.
Why, if he supported Joe Clark as strongly as he rather said he did, was he campaigning so strongly for people to write in letters asking Mr. Lougheed to put his...
Because he's campaigning for that because the Conservative Party is unified and will go forward from strength to strength until it disappears over a cliff like lemmings headed for the sea. I'll be back after the break. Monday morning, we've got Keith Bennett of FIR coming in to talk about the shake and shingle industry. Good program. We've got Jim Hewitt, who's the provincial minister in charge of the Crown Trust day-on problems with that big building in Vancouver and Crown Trust. That's a good start for the morning anyway, Monday at 9 a.m. precisely.
Jack, I think 1982 will well go down in history as the year of the auditor.
What's an auditor?
Well, an auditor is the guy who goes in after the war is over and bayonets all the survivors.
Look into that camera and tell the Joe Clark's enemies what you think of them when he had 66.9% and could easily have had a little motion, say, from Mulroney to make it 100%.
My message would be, thanks for nothing.
One lady said to me, there's only one way in which we can portray Gandhi on film, and that's by a moving light.
And you said?
I did.
You said? You're
I'm not making a film about bloody Tinkerbell. It got me into the most terrible trouble.
Jack, it seems only fitting that the big party by...
Tom Sidden's 30 Pieces of Silver on check at midnight. What happens to Crown Trust in BC with Jim Hewitt, Monday, 9 a.m. precisely.